Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to start videos on the patch 313 that just went into Wave 1 PTU last night. And where I think I'd like to start with this is with the gameplay that is the most exciting to me, and that's docking. Now, we are supposed to see ship-to-station docking later in this patch, but that part has not really come to fruition. And the part that actually has me really excited is the ship-to-ship docking, with the first iteration being present in the Constellation series and being able to launch the Merlin or the Archimedes. Now, the gameplay is working relatively well. However, there are some quirks in the process, so let's review it. First up, you need to pull out a Constellation, which will by default have one of the snub noses attached to the ship. Now, for testing purposes, I would probably recommend going somewhere relatively quiet, but you probably also don't want to be at a major quantum lane, just so you can avoid people coming out. So, don't just jump to, Magda from Everest Harbor and just deploy your ship there. We could create a little bit of space. Now, you can actually do all of this solo. You don't need anybody else involved. But when you actually get to your destination, you want to make sure that your ship is stationary and not drifting. I'd recommend leaving the engines on, though, when you get out of the seat, because what that'll do is it will help your Constellation to remain stationary when you're attempting to redock. Because if you nudge the Constellation with the Archimedes or the Merlin, it's going to put a pretty nasty spin on the ship that you don't want to have to deal with later on. Now, after you're set in place, you're going to run back to the rear of the ship. You're going through all the airlocks to the very back where you actually have the snub, where the canopies showing on the floor. You're going to end up interacting and entering the cockpit of that P-52 or P-72 that you have there. Now, once you're in place, go ahead and power on your ship. You'll see all your components going on, but you'll notice that you're still kind of trapped in the ship. And what you want to do is just tap in for landing gear. And what you'll hear is the ship's engines coming online, and the ship will tell you that the engines are engaged, and then all of a sudden the doors will open and you'll be dropped beneath the ship. Now, you are free to fly around to your heart's content at this point, but what I would say is this: remember that the Merlins and the Archimedes do not have quantum drives, so your top speed is the fastest that you're going to be getting anywhere. It's also worth pointing out that after you travel so far from your ship, at least right now, you start to end up losing track of your ship. I had it where the marker disappeared on my ship, and what I think happened was I was away from it with nobody on board, so it actually despawned, which meant I was left behind without any way to quantum or really go anywhere. I think that's something that will be updated and changed in the near future. I think it's a kind of a mistake because they don't want to just leave you stranded, and honestly, part of the reason for a snub is to be able to be a runabout. Now, redocking is a slightly different exercise, and it provides you with really two different options, manual and auto docking. Now, where things stand today, I would definitely recommend auto docking because it works very well and it helps to prevent damage to the ships. Regardless, once you want to redock, the first thing that you need to do is actually target the ship that you're trying to dock with. So hit T, even if it's your own. Once you actually have that ship targeted, you're then going to hit N again for gear, and you'll now see a new ship docking interface that will help to guide you in. If you're going at it manually, you do need to align the axis with the dots in the red box to get into the right spot. There seems to be a very, very, very small window to making this work in the current patch, which means that you really need perfection and timing really being the only real options to making it work. In earlier Evocati patches and earlier PTU stuff, it seemed a little bit easier to manually dock the ship. So I don't really know where they're intending for that to land, but it is possible to do it. It's just really being finite with your details. The alternative, though, is to go at it with autodock, which you can simply initiate by holding N after you have the ship targeted. Now, take note, it's tap N to get out of the ship, hold N to get back on with autodock. Now, I'm not sure on the range, but it doesn't really even feel like you need to be all that close for it to engage. And the feeling is similar to a ship-controlled planetary quantum jump, where it just takes control and docks you smoothly and quickly. It's pretty fast, faster than you would expect for autodock. Now, aside from pride, there really isn't much of a reason to be doing manual docking right now, except for maybe as like a proof of concept. You can also make the Constellation, or connection to the Constellation while it's in flight. But with that being said, it's a very strange experience. I had the Constellation going at about 100 meters per second, and even at that very manageable speed, you're definitely challenging the game's ability to manage this. You still, hit and hold N to engage the docking process. But with the ships flying, you end up being forced into weird vectors that result in you having a hard time aligning. If you can fight it and get close enough to the Connie, you can fire up the auto docking and it will make the connection. But I noticed that there was a pretty significant desync that resulted in kind of a snapping of the vehicle into place, which felt very unnatural. Now, I can't even imagine trying that with a manual mode because you can't really get close enough right now, at least in the current state, though I could kind of see a future state being a more controlled experience, getting in nice and close, then initiating the docking, then hitting the auto dock at the last second, just to take you in the rest of the way. PXP also did some testing with ownership and being able to dock into other ships as well. And first off, there's something broken with how the ownership of the snubs are assigned. It doesn't actually matter who owns the constellation in the Merlin. Whoever gets into the snub and deploys it first takes ownership of that vehicle, at least from a docking perspective. And what I mean by that is, if I was on Shaq's ship and I deploy the Merlin and I fly around and then I dock it, no one else can actually get back in. Like, somebody could get into it, but nobody else would be able to deploy it. It's basically stuck until I decide to take it back out. And that sucks for Shaq because it's his ship, and it's also a piracy risk as well. I assume that's something that's broken and will be replaced by actual ship sharing that we see in other vehicles pretty soon, but we'll have to see. And then as far as testing docking to another ship, I pulled my snub out of my ship, and we pulled a Merlin out of another constellation, and we were able to dock on each other's ships. Now, it does require that someone is sitting in a pilot seat. Not necessarily the Connie's pilot seat, but that there is an interaction that will pop up when someone is initiating docking mode. So Chef was in his constellation, and I approached it with my Merlin. And when I hit N, he approved it with a left bracket from that pop-up on the HUD to approve my landing, which then triggered the docking interface on my ship to light up, and I was able to auto-dock my way in. Similarly, but a little different, Shaq went to approve or to dock on my constellation, and I received the docking request from my Merlin, which I was able to approve, and then that let him land on my ship. So the short version is that it works, but you're going to need to watch the interaction pop-ups as they have relevant tasks for owners. I'll also note that sometimes it appears that it is just like a blank pop-up, which can make it a little bit dangerous because you don't really know what you're accepting, but at least for now, you may be just kind of accepting random things that pop up on the HUD while you're communicating with your team to make this work. The last note here is that I was able to deploy my Merlin from a landed constellation. I wasn't really sure how much clearance there would be there or how that would work, but honestly it was fine. I would say that if you don't have a ton of room to play with, so you need to kind of be aware of what your terrain is and what's beneath and below your ship and what's behind your ship, because you do kind of deploy down and backward. So you need to be logical about where you do it. Like if you're parked facing downhill, I don't think you're getting the Merlin out of there. So that's really kind of ship-to-ship docking, Tier 1. It's very exciting, and it's something that makes me get pumped to fly, to get in and fly casually with friends until I'm actually needed, then to deploy and help out in situations. That's fun, emergent gameplay. Now, once I get some footage of doing that, I'll make sure to cover that all for you guys here, as well as just seeing how Akani's performing with a little bit of assistance that I can now bring along. Also look for some videos coming up in 3.13. We have the Cyclone MT to cover, the new sinkholes. Rock DS is probably something we'll talk about, and just a lot more that's with 3.13. So if you have questions, please add them into the comments. Maybe consider supporting the channel on Patreon if you just appreciate the work. And aside from that, stay tuned for more content coming your way soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.